Um, Welcome everyone to the Sweet Run Master Plan meeting. I would like to welcome everyone to the public information meeting for Sweet Run State Park Master Plan. My name is Kelly McClary. I'm the Director of Planning and Recreation Resources for the Department of Conservation and Recreation. We're so excited tonight to introduce you to one of our newest state parks, and I'm sure many of you will believe it's the best state park. You're going to hear from a lot of people tonight. Amongst us, I'm going to introduce some people that are here with me tonight. Tonight we have our consultant team representing Roadside and Harwell, Rebecca May, Katie Stefanik, and Ben Valentine. And representing Kimley Horn is Nick Humes. I'd like to also introduce the Department of Conservation Recreation staff tonight. They include Josh Bateman, our Planning Recreation Resource Planner, Samantha Wainsgard, our Chief Planner, David Bryan, our State Parks Planner, Kevin Bowman and his staff from Sweet Run State Park. He is the park manager, and you'll be hearing from him tonight. Ken Benson, our State Park District Manager, and Tim Schrader, Eastern Field Operations Manager. You'll also be hearing from Dr. Melissa Baker, our State Parks Director. But right now I'm going to turn it over to Becky, which is going to start with some agenda items and some housekeeping items before we get started. Thanks a lot and welcome again, Becky.
All right, thank you very much, Kelly. So again, my name is Becky May. I'm a principal and landscape architect with Roadside and Harwell. And as Kelly noted, we're the firm that is collaborating with DCR to lead this master planning effort for Sweet Run State Park. And very excited to be doing so. As noted, our team also includes Kimley Horn, who will be providing transportation, environmental, and civil engineering services, as well as doing an economic and market analysis, and Gray and Pape, who will be providing services related to cultural resources and architecture, and you will be hearing from them tonight. Not with us, we have ETM, who will be consulting on the operational and park management needs associated with the development outlined in the master plan, and Conan Starkey will be doing cost estimating for proposed improvements. So I will start us off with these few housekeeping items. I wanted to note that the existing condition exhibits from the in-person public information meeting held on March 11th are available on the project website currently at the address that you see here. So if you'd like to take a closer look at the maps that we have in the presentation, you're welcome to do that. And then a recording of tonight's presentation will also be posted on the project website. The website contains a link to the public survey, which you will have until April 30th to fill out. And then during this presentation, questions can be submitted using the Q&A question box that's shown in the graphic on the right. So you can get to this box by clicking on Q&A circled in red here on the top of your window. And then you'll type your question into the box where the red arrow is pointed and submit by clicking Ask. So when your question goes through, you'll see it below under My Questions. And you can submit questions throughout the presentation. These will be read out at the end of the presentation period and then answered verbally. We ask that you use that Q&A box to submit questions that you have, and comments or any other feedback can be shared in the survey or in an email address that we'll share at the end of the presentation. So to make sure that everything is working properly for everyone, I just wanted to ask if anyone is not able to see the Q&A box where they enter their question on your own screen, could you please raise your hand by clicking the hand icon at the top of the screen? If you're not able to see the Q&A box. Let's see. Okay. So we have just a couple of people there who are not. So what we can do is everyone who is able to use the Q&A, please do continue to do that, enter your questions through that. For just the couple of you that are not able to use the Q&A, When we get to the Q&A period, we'll enable the chat, which you can see with the chat icon at the top of the screen. And you could enter your questions through the chat function instead. But again, if for everyone who is able to use the Q&A, please do use that method. All right, so today we're going to start off with an overview of the park and the purpose of this meeting. And then we'll talk through the existing site conditions and the market analysis. We'll review how you can reach the online survey. And then at the end of the presentation, as noted, we'll answer your questions. So with that, I will hand off to Melissa Baker.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment this evening to thank you all for giving up your evenings to be with us here as we enter the master planning process for Sweet Run State Park. Sweet Run State Park is the 42nd state park in the Virginia State Park system. We have 43 now, so it's not our newest state park, but it is our newest state park, our newest designated state park that's currently being planned. So we're really excited that you're here to help us lay the framework for the next 30 years. And as I say to our staff, it's much more than 30 years. So even though we do a 30-year plan and we review it every 10 years, really the first plan lays the framework, lays the groundwork for the future of the park in perpetuity. And so thank you for being part of that with us here today. Thank you for giving us your attention and also hopefully giving us your contributions of your thoughts this evening. So with that, I will turn it over to Kevin Bowman, the Sweet Run State Park Manager.
Thank you, Melissa. And I want to echo her in saying thank you to everyone for being here this evening. I know looking at the list, there are several of you who are intimately familiar with the park, but for those who haven't been to the park, or if you haven't been here very often, I want to give a little bit of overview of what we have and what we're all about so far. So next slide. So we have 884 acres. We are located in the Between the Hills Valley in the northwest corner of Loudoun County. We're about 2 miles south of Harpers Ferry. The property is entirely on the west side of Harpers Ferry Road. If you're familiar with the Between the Hills Community Center, we're located generally right across Harpers Ferry Road from the center. We have a wide variety of ecology here, from mature forest to open meadows, 2 streams, including our namesake, Sweet Run. We have a long history of agricultural heritage here on the property, with those open fields still in place here. We have many historic resources throughout the property that you have the opportunity to see as you hike our trails. We have approximately 11 miles of trails that are open both for hiking and for equestrian use. Next slide. So we continue a legacy of conservation and recreation on this property. The property was purchased by the Robert and D. Leggett Foundation in 1999, and the property was managed for 20 years under the Blue Ridge Center for Environmental Stewardship, providing the access for trails for the public, education opportunities, environmental research. They donated the park to the state of Virginia and to the Department of Conservation and Recreation beginning in 2016. And it's hard to believe we're already coming up on 2 years functioning as a state park, having opened or beginning operation as a state park in May of 2023. Next. We're fortunate to have several facilities here that we're able to operate in. On the top left there in the photos is our interpretive center, where we conduct programming throughout the season in that building, primarily in the warmer seasons, but we do programming here year-round, having conducted over 100 programs in 2024. We also have the Demery Wortman House, which serves as the park office. We have a unique hike and fishing opportunity with Gordon Pond. It's approximately three-quarters of a mile hike from the nearest parking area. It is a stocked pond. We have an equestrian trailer parking area off of our sawmill access. And we have several family-friendly facilities in the park. We have a picnic pavilion, as well as a nature play area that's currently under relocation over next to the picnic pavilion. And as I mentioned before, we have 11 miles of trail that are open year-round. And then I'd be remiss not to mention that I'm proud to serve along 7 of the finest rangers you'll find in Virginia State Parks. And we have a volunteer cadre of over 100 individual volunteers, as well as several partners, several volunteer partners that we work with for programming and resource management. So that gives you a little bit of overview of the park. If you haven't been out to the park, please come see us. And with that, I will pass it back to Becky.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So public engagement is a required step in the Virginia State Park master planning process because it's such an essential part of planning to share with and get feedback from current park users, potential future users, and others of you who have a connection to the park and the Between the Hills area. So the purpose of this meeting is to share information with you about the project, answer your questions, and then primarily to get feedback from you all through the survey about existing amenities at the park and what you would like to see in the future. So a master plan, for anyone who may not be aware, is the document that's required by Virginia State Code for all parks that highlights the park's unique features within the state park system. It identifies key resources and visitor experiences, as well as park needs, and it guides the long-term development of recreational amenities and improvements. The master plan is developed in stages with public input throughout the process. So essentially, we're looking at what we have currently, what the needs and wants are, and then the plan guides how to get there. All right, so next, looking at the timeline for the master plan. We're currently where the green dot is at the end of the evaluation of existing conditions phase and about to go into the visitor experience and needs assessment phase. We've met twice with our advisory committee, which I'll talk about a bit more in just a moment. And we have 2 additional meetings with them planned. The light blue dot to the left is this public information meeting where we are tonight. And the second light blue dot on the right shows when we'll hold the public comment meeting in the fall to share the draft master plan. Our team has a master plan advisory committee that will be consulting with us throughout the planning process. The role of this committee is to bring knowledge of and experience with the park itself and the regional context to help advise our team as related to each member's particular area of expertise. There were 17 organizations that were invited to join the master plan committee, including government partners, content experts, private organizations, nonprofits, and tribal representatives. And if you'd like to see the full list of advisory committee organizations, that can be found on the project website. All right, so next I'll go through the key steps in the master planning process. So the evaluation of existing conditions includes several components. First, understanding any property restrictions or legal issues. Looking at natural resources, including data from DCR's Division of Natural Heritage. The cultural resources inventory includes a review of research related to community settlement patterns and archaeological resources in the park, as well as some on-site documentation. We are also doing an inventory of physical resources, such as trails, roadways, parking areas, and structures. The market study includes a high-level demographic analysis and market profile, and we're compiling detailed maps of the park's resources using GIS data. So as for public outreach and engagement, after this meeting tonight, we will hold a public comment meeting in the fall where we'll present and get feedback on the draft master plan. We'll have meetings with the advisory committee between now and when we share that draft master plan. And as mentioned, the public survey will be open until April 30th to get your feedback about your experience at the park and potential future activities and amenities. Opportunities to provide feedback will be shared with the public in advance through various channels. And we recommend that you visit the project website frequently or follow Virginia State Parks on social media to stay up to date on the project. The Visitor Experience Workshop is a key step in the planning process. In this, the park statement, purpose statement will be developed along with interpretive themes and master plan goals. And this is done by looking at the inventory of physical, natural, and cultural resources that make up the park, as well as the results of the public input survey. So by identifying, also by identifying the park's audience types and what their wants, needs, and expectations are, as well as mapping different experience areas within the park and identifying what the essential experiences are that this park can offer. After this, the needs assessment will build on the results of the visitor experience workshop. And the purpose of this step is to summarize the results of the market analysis, define goals for natural, cultural, and physical resources and steps to achieve those goals, as well as to identify and prioritize park needs, grouping these into short-term, medium-term, and long-term phases with consideration of legal matters, funding, and other factors related to implementation. So this process generates the plan's recommendations for specific future improvements to physical resources, recreation facilities and amenities, and facilities for staff. So we will next draft a master plan document that includes a review of what we heard in the first round of public input, the park's mission statement, and a master plan map that addresses the park's needs and goals. This draft will be reviewed by the advisory committee and then shared, as I mentioned, at the public comment meeting in the fall. So at that point, we'll again seek your feedback on that draft master plan and we'll incorporate the feedback into the final master plan. That final master plan will go through several rounds of review by DCR and then the General Assembly before being signed and adopted. So then going forward, the master plan will be used to guide the development, utilization, and management of Sweet Run State Park and its resources. All right, so as I've noted, we're completing the analysis of existing conditions, and I'll next share an overview of our findings. So there are 5 easements on the park property that inform the park's use and development. 3 of these are conservation easements that are in place to preserve the character of the land. And I just wanted to note, in a state park, amenities are typically more focused on passive recreation, education, and the enjoyment of natural resources already, as opposed to a municipal park that may offer facilities for sports and other forms of active recreation. So Conservation Easement 1 is in yellow. So here on the west half of the park, the majority of the land either contains younger successional forests in areas where there were 18th to 19th century farmsteads, or where the land was never farmed and remains forest due to steep or rocky slopes, with small portions of that land still in field or meadow conditions. Conservation Easement 2, outlined in magenta or purple, is the northeastern portion of the park. So here, this area has historically seen relatively more development in the farmstead areas and currently contains the primary structures on the site, which are the Demery Wortman House, the Interpretive Center, and the farm buildings. So this area also serves as the point of arrival at the site, the primary point of arrival at the site, I should say. Conservation easement number 3 in green is agricultural in character. This area was previously farmed and much is still open field with some woody vegetation. Then in red, the mitigation bank easement protects restored streams and wetlands with buffer areas generally 200 to 300 feet on either side of the stream. And lastly, in dark blue, the power line easement running east to west in the southern part of the park allows power companies to use the land for transmission lines. So as many of you, I'm sure already know, the park provides a really rich tapestry of ecological conditions that reflect the natural environment, historic use, and contemporary activities. And we have some representative images of those different conditions here. So number 1, in the north part of the site, floodplain, lowlands, and wetlands. Number 2, the ephemeral stream in the north. And then we also have Sweet Run and Piney Run that converge in the center of the park. Number 3, in the north, demonstration gardens and in agricultural areas that invite visitor engagement. Number 4, mature forests in those more steeply sloped, unfarmed areas. And number 5, younger successional forests in previous farmstead areas. And then number 6, mown meadow and early successional vegetation, where there was previously some agricultural activity and the land is still being managed as meadow today. So the Virginia National Heritage Program performs a landscape assessment to identify ecological cores, which are large patches of natural land with at least 100 continuous acres of interior cover. And as you can see in red on this map, much of the park is ranked as outstanding, having the highest water quality protections and habitat diversity while also being rich in rare species. So next we have a mapping of slopes, since topography informs the types of activities that may be suitable in different areas of the park. So here the steeper slopes are shown in the red-orange range with shallower slopes in green. And the steepest slopes are in the areas that were primarily left unfarmed, and as a result, as I've mentioned, have the more mature forests. The areas with shallower slopes in the southern tract west of Sweet Run and on the east side of Sweet Run and Piney Run to the north will be assessed for uses compatible with the site conditions. And then one of the greatest assets of the park is the network of existing trails that provide a variety of experiences for both hikers and equestrians. And these trails were built and maintained long before Sweet Run was established as a state park. So Kevin has shared his team's assessment of the trails with consideration of slope, drainage, erosion, and other factors. And some of the trails do have issues that need to be addressed. So we'll take these assessments into account as we develop the draft master plan. So now I will hand over to Katie Stefanik with Gray and Pape.
Thanks, Becky. I'm Katie Stefanik. I'm an architectural historian with Gray and Pape, and we just completed our survey of the existing historical and archaeological resources in the park in February. Between several snowstorms, we were really fighting the weather this year. But you'll see some photos here on the slide of several different resources within the park. It's not uncommon for state parks to have archaeological or architectural assets, but Sweet Run does have a lot of them. It's a very rich historic area. It goes from pre-contact Native American occupation through the 19th and 20th centuries with these farmsteads. And as it's been mentioned, Sweet Run State Park is part of a historic district, the Between the Hills Harpers Ferry Historic District, which is a unique area that architecturally looks very similar. You know, there's a lot of stone. There's also some log buildings as well. It's also a rich area for Civil War history, you know, being just across the river from Harpers Ferry. There's the Clash of Loudon Heights. There's a lot going on. So it's an exciting place to explore. So we've documented these buildings. And so our next steps are to update their site forms. Both the archaeological and architectural resources have site forms that live with the state Historic Preservation Office. And so we'll update those with current photos and existing conditions, and then we'll use that to make recommendations to the park for ways to utilize these buildings and in the future. And that will go in the master plan along with the historic context that talks about, you know, why they're here, what kind of buildings they are, what kind of resources. The park also does maintain an artifact collection. Before it became a state park, there were several years of archaeological survey with field surveys and groups from various organizations and colleges and universities. And so they do have that collection, which could be used in the future as well. The assessments will go into the draft master plan and then continue to help inform the interpretation of the site in the future.
And my name is Nick Kuhn. I'm with Kimley Horn. I'm a landscape architect and park planner, and we're going to highlight the last piece of the analysis, or the upfront piece of the analysis here, and that's the market analysis segment. And this is one of the first things to highlight is this is not presenting any recommendations in terms of programming or development of the site, but becomes part of the upfront analysis information for consideration going forward. One of the first steps we do with market analysis is looking at service areas. And what I mean by that are essentially where are folks coming from when they visit Sweet Run. And so the map on the left of your screen identifies a couple different drive time radiuses. The first is what we call a primary service area, and that's approximately 1 hour drive time. That's shown with the red outline. And encompasses pretty much all of Loudoun County as well as some of the tri-state areas. That's pretty consistent with a what for many visitors would be perhaps a half day of visit time potentially to the site. The second is a secondary service area, and that's approximately 2 hour drive time. That's shown with the green outline on the map. That really encompasses the greater Washington, D.C. metropolitan area as well, and would be perhaps with a full day visit time for many visitors. The last is the tertiary or a 5 hour drive time. That's shown with the blue outline. That's a much larger geographical reach. And that would be really associated with visitors that would be perhaps visiting overnight or an extended period of time on the site. We'll primarily focus on the primary and secondary service areas with the information going forward, as those are, again, the areas that are closest to the sites and covers population ranges that include between 3 to 12 million folks within those service areas. On the next slide, we've got a few highlights for those service areas. The left side highlights some characteristics for the primary service area, while the right side indicates some of those for the secondary service area. Again, the 2 hour service area on the right. In both cases, many of the characteristics are above national averages and are expected to continue to increase. I'll focus a little bit on the center column information. And this is highlighting a comparison on the bottom center, the spending habits for recreation and travel. In both cases, for the primary service area, spending on recreation and travel is over 150% above national average, as well as for the secondary service area for recreation and travel spending. That's approximately 130% above national averages. So many folks are spending above national averages when it comes to those elements within their lifestyle. On the next slide, we have, again, a comparison between the primary on the left side and secondary service area on the right side. What these tables indicate are a few pieces of information. We've identified activities, again, that are closely aligned with traditional state park type of recreation and activities. These are in descending order in terms of comparisons with national averages. And what you'll see in each table is the activity identified first, and then a percent of adult population that has participated in that activity within the last year. The last column, indicated with an MPI, is the national average in terms of participation index. Anything associated with the number above 100 means it's above the national average in terms of participation rate. Anything below number 100 indicates below national average. And so you'll see most of those activities identified are above national averages, with hiking, jogging, and museum visiting representing some of those high participation rates. Right in the center are the top 5 activities that are most participated by adults. And that indicates the total adult population that participates in those activities within the last year. And so walking, over 36% of adults have participated in the last year in that kind of activity, including barbecuing, hiking, museums, and camping, rounding out the top 5 within that primary service area. So we'll drill down a little bit more on those trends on the next slide. We'll focus on some recreation trends, and most of these trends from the sports, fitness, and leisure activities top line participation reports are centered around what we call active recreation, not really those that you would typically find in a natural resource-based site or a state park, but there are a number of activities that are associated with those passive and even adventure recreation. And what we'll see is over the last several years, there has been a steady increase in terms of participation in all sorts of activities, but particularly we highlighted a few here that are adventure recreation as well as passive, including tent camping and bird watching and day hiking that all represent over almost 20% or more in terms of participation growth in the last few years. Day hiking, trail running have continued a decade-long growth in terms of participation with those activities. On the next slide, we'll drill down a little bit more into camping. This is an area that has been growing exponentially in the last few years post-pandemic. This is since 2019, the number of households that have camped in the last year has increased by 68%. This is also, in terms of the households, the frequency of camping, as well as the number of days or times annually, has also been increasing. Additionally, those under the age 35, that camp has increased as well as the blending of the camping trips with tent camping or other primitive type campings, as well as maybe stays with area hotels and resorts. Within that, we also have a different type of campings that have grown. Glamping, which is a more resource-based camping style, a little bit more maybe comfortable than tent camping for many, and may include access to utilities. That has been increasing steadily over the last few years, with over 44% of all camping sites providing some form of glamping as an option. Now, camping also is not just for adults. 57% of campers either bring pets and or children along. So having additional facilities in consideration for camping is also important. The last table on the left indicates some of the top reasons folks have identified as for camping. And so the number one is specific natural attractions or events, with 40% of respondents indicating that was a top reason for camping. 36% indicate food tourism, and 31% indicate visiting small towns and communities. And you can see an additional list there of some others. I'll turn it back over to Becky for wrap up.
All right, thank you, Nick. So as I've mentioned a couple of times, we really need your feedback to bring into the next step of developing the draft master plan. So we would like to hear from you about what is most important to you about the park now, what additional activities or amenities you would like to, you would be interested in seeing in the future. So the survey link is shown here on the screen. We also have the link on the project website, or it can be reached using the QR code here. So this will be open until April 30th. So please take a little time to fill this out so that we can get your input going forward. You also have the option to email DCR's planning resources email at planningresources@dcr.gov with any feedback. And if you do, please just include Sweet Run State Park Master Plan in the email subject line. So as I noted at the beginning of the meeting, a recording of this presentation will be posted on the project website, and exhibits from the first public meeting, which include the maps shown in this presentation, are posted there as well. And we will be posting updates on the project website as well. So again, the survey link is here just for reference, and you should be able to click on that link or any of the other links on this screen if you'd like to open up the survey or the project website as we are doing the Q&A. All right, so with that, I think we will open up the chat or enable the chat for just a couple of you that need to enter your questions there. And everyone else, please feel free to continue entering questions through the Q&A box. So thank you all for joining us. I'll turn back over to Kelly and Samantha Wangsgard to start looking at our questions.
Great. So my name is Samantha Wangsgard. I will be facilitating the question and answer portion of tonight's meeting. I also, like I said, Becky already introduced and Kelly's already had an opportunity to introduce herself. We'll work through the questions that you all have entered. And so Kelly, are you ready to start looking at some of these questions or
Ready?
start hearing some of these questions?
Absolutely.
All right. So our first question tonight is actually a multi-part one, so I'm going to break it down into chunks for you. The first part of the question, how do state parks comply with VDOT safety regulations? For example, the expansion of parking and vehicular traffic on Sawmill and Arnold Lane off of Harper's Ferry Road.
So that's a great question. As well as my portfolio overseeing master plans, I also oversee the design and construction of state parks. So I can answer that one really well. Anytime we improve any area as part of the state park, we develop those improvements alongside any of our external partners, including VDOT, VDOT, DWR, which is Department of Wildlife Services, and Department of Historic Resources as well as external partners to us. So we are always working with those groups of stakeholders and collaborating. Anytime we improve any part of our site, we would be required to submit plans to those external stakeholders for review and approval. So a lot of times I think what people see is a bad location or a hard turn that they're really concerned about because that turn may only get worse, right? I'm assuming people are concerned that when we have additional people to the state park, a turn would get worse. When we provide those improvement plans, we are always considering traffic counts and working alongside VDOT. So hopefully that allays any concerns or fears associated with that.
Thank you, Kelly. Part of the follow-up question, I believe you answered it, and part of your response was regarding traffic studies conducted on these two roads, and more specifically, speed limits and how many vehicles might utilize the trailheads.
Right. So any new park, it's new to everyone, right? It's also new to us and new to Kevin as a park manager, planning and working alongside those people inside the state parks. During that time, we assume that our numbers will increase as people are aware of our state parks, as people are aware of our master plan process. We're hoping that everybody comes to visit Sweet Run State Park. With that will be an increase, of course, with traffic along those roads. During that time, we'll be reviewing that, and as we provide entrance locations or different locations for those potential places inside the parks, we'll also, like I said previously, provide those plans to VDOT, be aware of the traffic counts alongside those roads, and be creating and developing potential turning lanes or potential additional parking associated with it to make sure that there's not a traffic safety concern. And so hopefully everyone on this call has visited one or 42 state parks of ours, and hopefully you'll have seen that with our work in the past. Is we start with particular acquisition, and in this development process, we proceed in that way as the safest way we can, as well as protecting and conserving all of our natural and historic resources that are inside the park.
Thank you, Kelly. One follow-up question to that was specific to equestrian parking at the main park entrance. If there was any plans for developing that particular amenity.
So this is the information meeting for master plan process. We'll also have a public comment meeting, as Becky said, in the fall, which will actually facilitate proposed facilities that we'd like the public to react to and provide input to. At this time, it's hard to tell what is going to be asked of us by the public. This is your time. We want to give this up to everyone on this call and our previous meetings so that you can tell us what you'd like to see. And then we can show you in a plan process of how to go about doing what you're asking of us. And so I know that sounds like a non-answer because until I understand or until we understand the public is interested in some of those facilities, it's difficult to proceed as to telling you how we'll put the facility in place without understanding or knowing that we actually can put it at that location. But as I said before, of course, we'll work in collaboration with all the external stakeholders, including VDOT, alongside of us.
Sure. Great. Well, thank you so much for those answers, Kelly. We do have a number of questions coming in, and just for folks listening in, if there are multiple questions that are similar, I will be trying to summarize those together so that Kelly can answer them in one answer. So if you're not hearing your question exactly repeated as it was typed, that's where we're headed, just so that some of those like ones can be combined and you can get one answer from Kelly or the other folks on the line. So our next question that came in, what will the DCR do to prevent further collapse of the Stonehouse and other extraordinary resources, farmsteads, and historic relics on site? And are there any plans for preservation or interpretation of those outbuildings, as well as the trails, pre-contact Native American sites and artifacts?
Well, our goal as DCR and our mission is always to conserve and protect our resources at those parks. I always say that we have 42, 43, as Melissa said, state parks for a reason, and most of the reasons are the cultural, historic, and ecological resources that are on our property. So that's our first mission, is to protect those. And as the archaeologist or historian that was talking earlier today had said, that's the first step, is our master plan process. Right now, we're identifying what we have at the park, and with her help, identifying the importance of those facilities. And from there, we'll dictate that on the master plan process and ask, of course, the public to tell us what they'd like to see happen to those facilities. But our first concern is always to conserve and protect those facilities. And then after that, we'll move forward to figuring out if there's a way to design and renovate those, only if the public asks us to do so.
Great. Thank you. The next question that came in is regarding easements. So we have a number of easements on site, as Becky discussed, and there are certain things that those do and don't allow. What can we address in terms of the different possibilities of uses, like mountain bikes or hiking or equestrian use, in relation to the easements and what those may or may not allow?
So we understand there's multiple easements that Becky went over that are on this particular Sweet Run State Park site. It is not the first time that out of our 43 state parks that we have easements that are restrictive in some manner or another. We also understand we'll be collaborative partners with all of those easement holders as we move forward. So with that said, as we get public input toward this process, and as we get an interest in particular facilities that may not work alongside the particular easement that's on this property, we're interested in seeing what the public input is. And then, of course, we'll then take those interests and figure out what is the best way to move forward with this state park, and how is the best way to answer the public demand as to those facilities. So it also means that we may not be able to put everything that is asked for at this site. We understand that as the owner of this property, and we also understand that we want to conserve the property, and so sometimes everything doesn't fit everywhere. But with that said, we also want to make sure this is a public input process. And so with that, we want to hear from you. And then what we'll do is take that information and figure it out. This won't be the first time that you hear from us. And so as we get that input, by the second meeting and we show and share some of the facilities that you've asked us to build, we'll also explain to you why we may not be able to build some facilities based on easement language.
Great. Thank you for that answer, Kelly. Appreciate it. The next question comes in, and there's a few related to our different workshops, needs assessment meetings, advisory committee meetings. So those will kind of be the next ones coming through the queue. Who is allowed to participate in the visitor experience workshop?
So the visitor experience workshop is an internal customer-based workshop that we also, I believe, and I may have to throw this to Melissa, but I believe that the advisory committee is also involved with that workshop. And what that does is allow for a 1 day or 2 day planning time with internal stakeholders to discuss how is it that visitors come to the site, how is it they leave the site, and what is our goal for the experience when they're at the site. And the majority of stakeholders also include, I believe, the advisory committee that helps us to determine those answers. Melissa, if you are on, could you elaborate if I didn't do that justice?
I am on. A slight correction to what you said. So the advisory committee does get engaged, but not in the actual workshop. So the workshop happens with our park staff and our interpretive staff as they evaluate the site conditions, what we know about the site, the importance of the site, and the interpretive themes. They develop materials from that, and then they report that out to the advisory committee, and the advisory committee has opportunity to feed back into that process. But the actual workshop is typically conducted with Virginia State Park staff.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa. That actually segues well into the advisory committee questions that we have up next, Kelly. So some of the next questions, so these are, again, a few of these are multi-part. So I'll start off with how is the advisory committee feedback gathered? Is there a single meeting to receive and make a decision? Or can partner representatives take information and questions back to their experts before stating a position? And I can repeat those if you need me to.
No, that's fine. So any new state park, we have the most advisory committee meetings. So in this particular one, 2 advisory committee meetings have already occurred. And I believe there's 2 more set to occur. Of course, should they request additional one, we also can follow through with that advisory committee. Those advisory committee members, I believe there's 15 to 20 members on this particular committee. They are external and internal partners to Sweet Run State Park, and they help us guide this process. So any part of the process, we bring them, just kind of like Melissa just explained with the visitor experience, is we might do internal workshops associated with work toward this end of this master plan, but we'll bring it to the advisory committee and ask them to weigh in after we've had individual meetings as well. So any part of the process, the master plan committee, the advisory committee can weigh in, and we share it with them along the way, and they'll be part of this process all the way to the end, right before the BCR board meeting. And BCR is the Board of Conservation and Recreation.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. I think there's 2 other questions regarding providing input, if the advisory committee provides input on the draft plan, and also the schedule for the advisory committee. I believe you answered both of those in your question, but if there's anything else you wanted to expand on in terms of how the advisory committee provides input on the draft plan and the schedule. I do also want to note to participants that Becky's presentation will be made available, and that does include the schedule, which also outlines when the advisory committee will be meeting.
Right, so the advisory committee will take place all the way through this process until we recommend, well, they'll help us to recommend this draft master plan to the Board of Conservation and Recreation. Once we do that, we'll take it from there, meaning DCR takes it from there and presents it to the Board of Conservation and Recreation. That is also the last and final public meeting. It is a public meeting, so you can attend that as well. And if you want to see that presentation, you can do so. And then once the board approves it, we send it to the General Assembly for 30 days, and all of the members of the General Assembly get to weigh in on the master plan. And they also get to hear about the advisory committee and their role in that process. And then lastly, last and final, once there are no comments back from the General Assembly, we then adopt it. And our goal at this point is to do that hopefully by the end of this calendar year or sometime in the new year. I don't know if we have exactly the schedule down right this second, but our goal is to have a next public meeting in the fall.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Kelly. We'll pivot away from some of the advisory committee questions for the time being. If we do get more that are different from the previous ones, we'll segue back to those as we go through the questions. The next question is regarding accessibility, and I appreciate we did get a link in the question, so this will be something we can certainly share with the consulting team and DCR staff. But will accessibility for disabled visitors be taken into account for planning, i.e. the birdability? And there was a link attached to that we'll be happy to convey to the team.
So yes, absolutely. Part of this process is just those comments that you provide to us today. And of course, it's being recorded today. So, but we're always interested in furthering the ability to get everyone at a state park, and everyone includes everyone with any kind of ability or non-ability. And so the goal for this park absolutely will continue to be just that. We'll continue to ensure that we get people of all kinds coming to our parks and being able to enjoy the outdoors. And we understand that with trails in particular, sometimes that's more difficult, and sometimes outside areas are more difficult. So I do pride myself when we get into the design and construction of these facilities, or we move into new facilities, we ensure that they're all ADA accessible.
Thank you so much, Kelly. There's two questions regarding what appear to be Nick's portion of the presentation. I don't know if you want to pivot these to him or if you feel comfortable answering them directly. The first part is, has Harpers Ferry National Park visitor data been considered in the marketing portion? And if you could please also define MPI.
Nick, would you like to take that?
Yes, absolutely. I'll start with the reference to Harpers Ferry visitors information. That is not at this time because we're at a very high level in terms of the overall service area, but certainly other destinations within those service areas will continue to be folded into the analysis for considerations, and that will also align with the potential programming that is eventually identified for the site. And then the MPI acronym is the Market Participation Index, is what that means. And that's, again, a ratio that indicated anything above 100 was above national average. Anything below 100 was considered below national average participation rates.
Great.
Thanks, Nick.
Sure.
Thank you, Nick. Yep, absolutely. So the next questions are related to access to the Appalachian Trail and Sweet Run State Park. And there's several that are very similar. So again, I will be summarizing these and trying to capture the essence of both as part of one question. Are there any plans to tie in access to the AT more to Sweet Run State Park or introduce primitive camping sites to the park? And then would the park allow hikers to park their vehicles at the park and hike the AT as part of their use?
So, I believe the National Park Service representative is actually on, or it might be the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, but I believe they are one representative, if not more, are on the advisory committee. We are always working with external partners associated with access and additional access, especially to trails. Kevin, would you like to add anything associated with current access right now?
Yeah, I can say that currently we do not have an official connection to the Appalachian Trail, but that is something that has certainly been identified, previously in the process as a potential for connectedness to the trail.
Kevin, would you also be able to answer a follow-up question in terms of the power line trail and primary access from the park to the AT, or is that something you and Kelly and Melissa could speak to?
Yeah, is that regarding current or future access?
It says will the power line trail, so it may be a question of, is that something that's being considered as part of the master plan? And again, either if that's something that you or you want to pivot back to Kelly, I just have you on my screen.
Yeah, I would say that this has certainly come up and certainly something that's on the radar. Regarding overnight access, I would say that that's part of what this master plan is all about, is identifying to see if that is going to be something that would be a viable option and something that our partners would want. We certainly want to be respectful to them and their access to their facilities. But again, I would say that these are all things that have been presented on the table.
Great. Thank you so much, Kevin. Kelly, we'll pivot back over to you. And again, this may actually be something that you could weigh in on in terms of operations at the park. Are there any plans for pesticide limitations with regards to potential farming activities? And what do state parks do in terms of enforcing those kind of limitations? I'm trying to, limitations may be a typo, but basically looking at pesticide use on potential farming activities at the park and enforcement.
So within the Department of Conservation and Recreation, we have the Division of Natural Heritage, and they oversee, of course, any of the any invasive species management, of course, any endangered species, both plants and animals. So we usually use their recommendations associated with any of the park management when it comes to any of those resources. We're mindful of invasive species. We're mindful of endangered species. We're mindful of historic resources. So all of those things come into play when it comes to management of the park. Kevin, would you like to talk about anything that you're doing ongoing right now?
Yeah, I would say currently we don't have any agriculture to, sort of have to weigh against, but when it comes to any kind of pesticide or herbicide application, those currently would be exclusively relegated to invasive management, and anything of that nature that we do are all under federal or state regulations done by certified applicators following those regulations.
Great. Thank you both so much. The next question may be more specific to Katie's slide. So Katie, if you're able to participate in the answer to this, and I'm trying to also scan to see if there's others that might combine with the information that you've shared.
Sure.
Based on the slide that you presented, or slides, what is the documentation available that identifies and describes the Between the Hills Harpers Ferry Historic District? And then there's a question regarding how the interpretation of the history, including Native Americans and the farm hamlet, may be included in the plan. But again, those both might be yours. If you do want to defer back over to Kelly to answer those, or Kevin for that matter, please let me know.
Sure, I don't mind answering. So the Between the Hills Harpers Ferry Historic District was recorded just with the state, the Department of Historic Resources, and it hasn't been advanced to like a National Register nomination. So I don't think that text is fully publicly available, but I will say it will definitely inform the historic context that we're putting in the draft master plan. So when that comes out, that will summarize sort of why this area is significant, and how the resources inside the park relate to it. But it's a historic district that spans kind of 17th to 19th century occupation, farming, and then a little bit related to the Civil War. So it's a diverse historic district, as most rural proposed historic districts in the state are. And then, sorry, the second part of the question, Samantha?
The second part of the question relates to how you plan to interpret the history, including Native American. And again, there may be a missing word in this, and the farm hamlet. Now, that may be a Kevin question, so or a question related to state parks. I just wanted to, while we had you answering the other one, if this was one that was related to your slide. If not, we can hand it back over to Kevin or Kelly.
Yeah, or Melissa, you might want to take that one.
I thought we'd be kicking it to Kevin, so can you
sorry.
repeat it to me? That's all right. Can you repeat it for me, Samantha?
Sure. Can you discuss how you plan to interpret the history, including Native American and the farm hamlet? So again, I think there may be a word missing in that, but that's the question, and it seems to be Native Americans on the set, the history of Native Americans on site, and the farm hamlet.
Well, that is a very good question. I'm going to have to answer you in generalities because I don't know that we've made those decisions yet, and fed those through the process yet. What I can tell you is that we have been doing a lot of work to be more inclusive in our storytelling and to also have better understanding of our sites so that we can tell the full stories of the sites that we have there. I would expect that as the visitor experience team does the workshop, some of those will be identified, and what might also be identified that doesn't make the plan necessarily is needs for further information as we would expand our visitor experiences. What we have been really working a lot on is to engage, especially universities, to help do some primary research to inform our interpretive efforts. So I can't give you an exact answer to the question, but what I can tell you is that it will be considered, and if we don't have themes associated with those in this, it will be something that will go in queue for potential future research.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to save this one towards the end. So there are a couple questions regarding the power line easement and Dominion Power that I'm going to try and again summarize. So regarding the expansion of the power line and the potential impacts to the park, what plans does the DCR have in terms of mitigating those potential impacts, and what information has the DCR gathered from Dominion and others regarding these potential impacts and power needs in the county and the impacts to the park?
So currently there is a corridor that Becky showed you on one of the slides, and that includes that power easement. Currently, that is the power easement that we understand and that we will work with those partners with. We do understand from previous meetings that that they plan on increasing that area. We don't have those facts in front of us right now, meaning that should there be a widening or should there be an increase of height of poles out there, we will work with that power company alongside them to figure out what that means. I know there's a lot of concern out there regarding just that corridor. All we can do is react to the information as we receive it and understand it and work during this master plan process to buffer those kind of things. But we also, I do want to alleviate most of the people out there that the current easement is the only easement currently on that ground right now. So we are planning alongside with that easement that's there today. And as we receive more information toward that end, which many of you on the call may know more about it than I do at this point in time, but as we receive more information, all we can do is promise you that we will continue to conserve and protect and buffer those areas away from the remaining areas of under conservation at our park.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Next couple of questions are regarding equestrian topics. So we'll pivot to those. Are there guidelines for trails that are shared by equestrians and hikers that will be taken into account with the master plan? For example, trails that might have certain widths to allow passing. And generally speaking, do parks consider the difficulties between user groups such as hikers and horses when they both may be frequenting the same trail space?
So we have many parks with miles and miles of trail alongside them and within them across our 42 state parks. Some parks have mountain. Most of our parks have multidiscipline trails, meaning walkers, bikers, and equestrian users. Some of our parks identify where those trails are, meaning separation of use, and some combine those areas. We'll leave it up to the park and the work within the Visitor Experience Committee to determine some of those areas along this park. We do understand that there's easements on this park, and so we're going to have to be sensitive to those areas as well. That is a question that is actually for this process, meaning we need to understand from the community what their interest is, and then we will take that in and determine how we can put those facilities, including, and when I mean facilities, I also mean trails, on the ground in the most sensitive way possible at the location that's being asked for. But usually what that also means is what facilities go along with those trails. So obviously a parking area for an equestrian user is much different than maybe a parking area for a walker because they have larger vehicles, right? And so those are the things that we have to keep in mind as we move forward to those facilities. What we never want to do is overbear the area we're trying to conserve, whether it's with vehicular traffic or pedestrian traffic. At the end of the day, our mission is to protect and conserve the park as well and recreate at the park. So we have to find that perfect median, and we don't know what that is right now at Sweet Run until we understand what the interest is of the user groups. So that's what this process is for.
Great. And Kelly, I think the next question you may have answered in your answer there, but it just talks about when you have potentially competing uses, or not even competing uses, but of the resource space itself, for example, streams, and how the master planning process may be able to address those kind of concerns when you might have a stream and either horses, hikers, bikers nearby, and the potential impacts from those user groups on sensitive resources like the streams.
Right. So along with all of those users, we have those natural resources like streams, like wetlands. And we do a good job of buffering those areas, but there's always times where there's areas that we're trying to cross those areas, or we're bringing people to them to visit and to educate them. So I do believe that the most important way to educate them is to bring them to those places. But in order to bring them to the places, we have to do it sensitively. And so whether a bridge is the crossing of the stream, those are ideas that we haven't fleshed out yet because, of course, we haven't laid any trails out on the ground for this master plan process. When you come to the next meeting in the fall, hopefully by then we'll have proposed facilities that we are able to lay out for you so that the public can see them and give us more reaction to them. But when we do lay them out, we promise we'll be sensitive to the existing facilities and the conservation easements that are on the ground now.
Great. The next question may bounce back over to Katie, but certainly Melissa or Kevin, if this also applies to you all. With respect to inclusive history, what work or research is being done to address and illuminate, former enslaved populations, people held as enslaved labor associated with the former farms and communities? So I'll defer to you all to divide and conquer on answering that one.
Sure. So that is definitely part of some of the research that's already been done by previous student groups and university programs that did some of the archaeological studies. Excuse me. And that will be part of our work as well. I'm so sorry. I'm choking all of a sudden. That'll be part of our work as well. And then we will also make that as part of our recommendations for future research if we're not able to uncover that in as great a detail as we'd like.
And this process never ends. So for those of you on the phone and listening, this isn't the beginning and end of this process when we finish it and propose it to the board. This process continues during the lifetime of the park. So as Kevin continues to be the park manager, we'll continue developing those measures alongside him. And as we find more information from friends groups, from local community colleges, from those historians that want to provide us the information that we can filter through, that process will continue with this master plan process. Like I said, it's not the beginning or the end. It's only we will be continuing this for the life of the park. And so I think if anything, the promise is if we don't have all of the character within the process at this master plan, we'll continue to invest in that, in those the background of the peoples that were there before us.
Thank you so much, Kelly. So we've got a handful of questions left. I think you actually started to talk on one of these. Once the park master plan is adopted, how will park improvements be prioritized and implemented?
So once we adopt it, that's where we start a request for funding to the General Assembly. The great news about our master plan process is one of the last steps is a 30-day comment period by the General Assembly, but it's also a good time for them to read that process for a new state park and to read the development plan that we include within that master plan. So once this plan is complete, it'll have approximately a 3-phase development plan process and cost associated with that. Those costs will be submitted to the General Assembly for review, but we'll also utilize those costs for future capital requests. And so as I spoke before, not only do I do the master plan process, but I also oversee the design and construction process. And each year we're asked to make a capital request to the to the governor's office, and with my leadership, we'll make sure, that Sweet Run will be one of the 43 state parks that will begin that process. Certainly it starts with the master plan. It's we cannot ask for capital funding without a master plan in place. So we're at stage 1, and then the future stages will be those capital requests that I just referred to.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. So we did get a couple of questions regarding the advisory committee that came in after we answered some of those questions. So I just want to summarize. Will the advisory committee provide input on the draft plan before it goes to the public? The answer we had given earlier on that is yes, they'll have the opportunity to provide input. And how much of the advisory committee is internal, and what does the membership look like? Becky had mentioned in her presentation that the membership is publicly listed on our project webpage, but Kelly, if you wanted to add anything to either of those answers, that wraps up the advisory committee questions that had come in after we had answered those.
Right, I believe we have posted the committee members. Is that correct, Samantha?
Yes.
Mhm. So those are at the project website, and of course on the screen right now is our website, dcr.virginia.gov/Sweet Run Master Plan. You can find a lot of that information that's already come before you, and this presentation will also be posted there as well.
Great. Well, so the very last question, just to wrap up the questions that we have received. Will the survey results be published on the project webpage? So speaking again to the project webpage and the public information surveys that we're requesting input on, will those be published on the project webpage? And I can answer some of that too if you'd like me to.
Sure. Go ahead.
So as Becky had mentioned, we do have that public input survey that's available on the slide that you should be seeing right now. I don't have it on my main screen. So all of that information will be collected and analyzed and summarized and included as part of the master plan document itself. So our main avenue of using that survey will be collecting the information, and it will be summarized and included in the master plan, which will be posted to the project webpage once approved and available on the master plan page. So it will be included in that final master plan document and as part of the efforts in compiling it. So let me make sure that should be all of the answers or all the questions. Great. So I'm not getting any more coming into the Q&A tracker here. So I would say that concludes our question and answer period. And again, we really appreciate having everyone here tonight. And if you have follow-up questions or you think of something after the meeting, that planning resources webpage is available or email is available to submit questions or follow-ups. And like I said, we'll be posting different information onto that project webpage, as well as having that survey open for y'all to participate in and provide your additional input. So Kelly, did you have any closing words for tonight?
No, I wanted to thank everyone for attending tonight. It looks like we had quite a number of people that attended, and we appreciate your comment. And like I said, if you did not have a chance to ask a question tonight, our information and our survey will be open until April 30th, and you always can use planning resources at dcr.virginia.gov. As a resource, you can email that any question you would like and just put in the subject line Sweet Run State Park Master Plan so that we know what we're answering. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.